Unit 10, page 85. Read. Exercise 2. Read and listen to the text.
Great Journeys. Marco Polo. In 1271, 18-year-old Marco Polo set off from his hometown of Venice with his father and uncle, who were wealthy merchants, to visit China. They went by ship to Anatolia and travelled the rest of the way overland. They followed the Silk Road, along which merchants from China brought silks to Europe. The road runs north of the Himalayas, and the journey took 4 years. The Emperor, Kublai Khan, welcomed them warmly, and Marco became a civil servant and diplomat. After 17 years working for the Emperor, the Polos decided to travel home. At first, the Khan refused to let them go, but in 1292 they received permission and returned home by sea, arriving in 1295. Marco spent the rest of his life as a merchant in Venice. At one time, he was imprisoned, and while in jail, wrote an account of his travels, which inspired other explorers such as Christopher Columbus. Ibn Battuta. As a boy, Ibn Battuta studied the Holy Quran and became an expert in Muslim theology. When he was 21, he set off from Tangier on the pilgrimage to Mecca, and during the next 28 years, he travelled more than 120,000 kilometres, even further than Marco Polo. After visiting Mecca, he joined a caravan of pilgrims which was returning to Persia, now Iran. He continued to travel around the Middle East, studying the people and culture, and writing down anything that interested him, and he eventually arrived in Delhi. He stayed there for 8 years, working for the Sultan. In 1342, he was sent by the Sultan as his ambassador to China. Having survived a number of shipwrecks, he reached his destination in 1344. He was impressed by Chinese culture and their use of paper money, but after a year, he decided to return home. Back in Tangier, Ibn Battuta wrote an account of his adventures called Rila. Many of his contemporaries refused to believe the story of his travels, and it was only long after his death that he came to be appreciated. Vasco da Gama. In 1497, Vasco da Gama was sent by the King of Portugal to find a sea route to India. With 4 ships and 170 men, he sailed down the Atlantic Ocean, and after surviving a terrible storm, finally reached the Cape of Good Hope, the southern tip of Africa. There he abandoned his largest ship and sailed up the coast of East Africa, stopping at various ports. The Portuguese were surprised to find rich Arab towns with stone houses on the coast. The Sultan of Malindi welcomed him and supplied 2 Arab pilots to guide him to India. Thanks to them, he was able to cross the Indian Ocean to Calicut in southern India. Shortly after that, da Gama departed for home with a rich cargo of spices, but he lost 110 men and 2 ships. He sailed to India again in 1502, and after this voyage he retired. However, at the age of 64, he decided to return to India, but died in Goa shortly after arriving there in 1524.
Unit 10, page 88. Listen. Exercises 1 and 2. Listen to two teenagers discussing inventions.
So which 3 inventions and discoveries shall we choose?
Well, I think we should include the telephone.
Really?
Yes. Before the invention of the telephone, communication was really slow. You had to send a letter or maybe a telegram. But now you can contact people anywhere in the world in just a few seconds.
Let's choose the mobile phone then, because you don't even need to be in a building or a phone box to make a call.
OK, the mobile phone then.
What about our second choice? I think we should include a medical discovery of some sort.
OK, what about pasteurised milk and frozen food? These processes mean that food can last longer and can be transported further. So generally, people can have a better diet and are more healthy.
Those are certainly important discoveries. But I think antibiotics, like penicillin, is a more significant invention. Before antibiotics, millions of people died from simple infections. Eating good food keeps people healthy, but antibiotics can prevent people from dying.
Yes, I agree with you. I think antibiotics should be on our list.
OK, so we've chosen 2. We need 1 more. What about the aeroplane?
That's certainly a very important invention, but all it's done is made it easier and quicker to travel. It's also done a lot of damage to the environment.
Like the car.
Yes, that's right. Let's not include those 2.
I know. What about paper or writing? Those are certainly important. Well, before writing and paper were invented, people couldn't record anything. They could talk to one another, but the information was quickly forgotten.
That's a good idea. Shall we say paper then?
Well, I think the invention of writing is more significant. It doesn't matter what you write on, does it?
OK, let's go for writing then.
So, who invented writing then?
Unit 10, page 91. Language skills. Exercise 1. Listen and check.
Have you done any research for your school project?
Yes, I've been inspired by an article about an explorer called Ferdinand Magellan.
Ferdinand Magellan? The Magellan Strait was named after him, is that right?
Yes, that's right. Magellan discovered the route from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean through the southern part of South America.
So where did the expedition set off from?
Magellan left Spain in 1519 with 5 ships and 234 sailors. They crossed the Atlantic Ocean and reached the coast of South America. While Magellan was looking for the route to the Pacific, one of his ships was shipwrecked in a sudden storm. Another ship abandoned the expedition and returned to Spain.
And did they reach their final destination?
Yes. 3 years later they returned to Spain with just 1 ship and 18 men after crossing the Pacific and Indian Oceans. It was the first voyage to sail around the world.
So I suppose Magellan was greeted as a hero when he got back.
Well, no. Unfortunately, he was killed in a battle with local people on an island in the Pacific.
Everyday English. 10. Teacher's book. Page 120. Asking for information. Exercise 1. Read and listen to the dialogue.
Good morning. I wonder if you could help me. I'm looking for a book called The Great Explorers.
If we've got it, it'll be over there in the history section.
I've looked, but I can't see it on the shelves.
Let me just check on the computer. Do you know the name of the author?
I think it's Hammond.
Ah, yes. We do have it, but I'm afraid it's out on loan. But I can reserve it for you.
Yes, please. When is it due back?
a week tomorrow?
That's fine.
Okay. If I could just take some details.
Everyday English. 10. Teacher's Book. Page 120. Asking for information. Exercises 3 and 4. Listen to 3 people in a library. 1.
Can I help you?
Yes, I need a book for school. It's called The World's Greatest Inventions.
All our science books are over there, in the Science and Technology section.
I'm afraid I couldn't find it.
Let me have a look on the computer. It's out on loan, I'm afraid.
Oh dear. When is it due back?
In 10 days. We've got other books on inventions. What about the Book of Inventions?
OK, I'll take that instead. How long can I borrow it for?
3 weeks.
OK, that's great.
2.
Excuse me, I want to learn Arabic. Can you recommend anything?
Try looking under foreign languages. It's at the back, next to the reference section. I think we've got quite a few self-study books on the shelves.
Okay, thanks.
Did you find anything suitable?
Yes, I did. Teach Yourself Arabic and Arabic Made Easy. Can I take out both books?
Yes, you can take out up to 5 books.
Great.
Can I have your library card, please?
Here you are.
3.
Excuse me, I'm looking for a book called The Ugly Princess. Do you know it?
No, I don't. Is it for children?
Yes, it is, but I can't remember the name of the author.
Don't worry, I'll look it up on the computer. Ah, here it is. It's by Malcolm Bryant. But I'm afraid we haven't got it in this library. I can order it from another library.
Yes, please. How long will it take to come?
It's difficult to say. Maybe a week or 10 days.
Okay, that's great.
Can you write down your name and telephone number? We'll call you when the book arrives.
Okay, that's great.
Literature Corner. 5. Page 92. Exercise 2. Read and listen.
Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. When I woke up in darkness, my head was hurting badly and I was unable to move my hands or feet. I could hear the sailors' shouts and the sound of the wind and the waves. The whole world seemed to go up, 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 and then down again. I felt very ill, and at first could not understand what was happening. After a while, I realized that I must be somewhere inside the ship, which was moving very fast through the water. I've been kidnapped, I thought angrily. It was clear that my uncle and the captain had planned it together. I began to feel frightened and hopeless as I lay there in the dark. Some hours later, a light shone in my face. Mr. Riach, one of the ship's officers, stood looking down at me. He washed the cut on my head, gave me some water, and told me kindly to go to sleep. The next time he came, I was feeling very hot and ill. He had brought Captain Hoseason with him. "Now, sir, see for yourself," said Mr. Riach. "The lad's seriously ill. We must take him out of this unhealthy hole at once." "That's none of your business," answered the captain. "You're paid to do your job, not worry about the boy. He's staying down here." "I'm only paid to be an officer on this ship," replied Mr. Riach sharply. He looked hard at the captain. "I'm not paid like you to kidnap and murder." Hoseason turned on him angrily. "What did you say?" he cried. "What do you mean?" "You understand," said Mr. Riach, looking calmly at him. "You should know me by now, Mr. Riach. I'm a hard man, but if you say the lad will die—" "Aye, he will," said Mr. Riach. "Well, sir, put him where ye like." So I was carried up into the sunlight a few minutes later and put in a cabin where some of the sailors were sleeping. It was a wonderful feeling to see the daylight and to be able to talk to people again. I lay in the cabin for several days and after a while began to feel better.
Skills Roundup, page 93. Listen. Exercise 1. Listen to part 1 of The Speckled Band. The Speckled Band, Part 1. At 7:15 in the morning, Sherlock Holmes wakes Dr. Watson and tells him that there is a visitor downstairs, a young woman called Helen Stoner. She is very frightened, and she has come to see Sherlock Holmes to ask for help. He asks her to explain why she is frightened. Helen Stoner tells Holmes that she lives in the south of England with her stepfather, Dr. Roylott. Dr. Roylott met Helen's mother, a widow, when they were both in India. Her father had died a few months earlier. Helen and her twin sister Julia were only 2 years old when their mother married Dr. Roylott. Helen Stoner explains to Holmes that her stepfather is a violent man. While they were living in India, somebody burgled their house, and Dr. Roylott was so angry that he murdered one of his own servants. He spent a long time in prison for his crime. Then, he came back to England with his wife and daughters. Soon after they got back to England, Helen's mother died in an accident. This was 8 years ago. 6 years later, the sisters were no longer children. Julia was planning to get married. One evening, 2 weeks before the wedding, Helen was in Julia's room, talking to her. Julia mentioned a strange sound, a whistle, that she sometimes heard at night. Helen said she hadn't heard it. She left the room and went to bed. Later that night, Helen woke up when she heard her sister scream. She ran to Julia's room. Julia opened the door. She was in terrible pain. She said something about a speckled band. Their stepfather came, but he couldn't do anything to help Julia. She died in a few minutes. What had she meant when she talked about the speckled band? It was a mystery. Skills Roundup, 1 to 10, page 93. Listen. Exercise 2. Listen to part 2 of The Speckled Band. The Speckled Band, Part 2. Now, 2 years later, Helen is planning to get married. She is frightened because she has started to hear a strange sound at night, a whistle, just like her sister mentioned before she died. Helen thinks that her own life is now in danger too. Sherlock Holmes visits the house. He examines the room where Julia was sleeping when she died. He notices that there is a rope by the bed. This room is now Helen's bedroom. Gradually, Holmes works out what has happened. He agrees that Helen's life is in danger and tells her that she cannot sleep in the room tonight. Holmes and Watson wait in the room overnight, while Julia sleeps in another room. For hours, nothing happens. Then suddenly, they hear a whistle. Holmes jumps up and hits the rope by the bed with his stick. A few seconds later, they hear a terrible scream. They go next door and find Dr. Roylott sitting in a chair, dead. Around his head is something that looks like a band of speckled or spotty material. Then it moves. It's a snake. Holmes recognises it as the most poisonous kind of snake in India. Holmes reveals that it was Dr. Roylott who murdered Julia and was planning to murder Helen. He had brought the snake back from India and trained it to go from his room down the rope to the other bedroom. He gave it instructions by whistling. When Holmes frightened the snake by hitting the rope with his stick, it went back and attacked Dr. Roylott. One bite was enough to kill him in 10 seconds.